Hello everyone, investment scams rampant. Please vigilant and discerning. Do not trust information from unknown sources. Please make sure recognize 2 official Capital Securities community, Facebook, Capital Securities, YouTube, Capital Wealth Insights.
Junie, good evening. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you have any investment questions, leave a comment. If I don't have time for your questions, I'll address them in the next class. Today is another wonderful Friday. Besides asking everyone to like and share, our topic will be more relaxed. We'll chat about recent market trends. Let's look at investment focus. What does deliberate mistake mean? Is it deliberate or intentional? Regarding warm appeals in the tariff lawsuit, what did Trump and Bessent do? Which incident does this deliberate mistake refer to? Last night, in our Good Night program, we followed up on the U.S. initial and continuing jobless claims. The market originally, the market estimated that with Trump's tariff war adding fuel to the fire, companies' costs might go up, which would indirectly create pressure for layoffs. So, both the initial and continuing claims numbers might maybe increase slightly. But in last night's data, both the initial and continuing claims numbers dropped significantly. This drop, while it eased markets, concerns job market economic recession. But unexpectedly, just 24 hours later, the U.S. Department of Labor announced that there were some errors in the data released last night. Was this mistake intentional, or did someone tamper with the numbers? Moving forward, whether it's employment data or CPI data, how should everyone approach and interpret these figures? In addition, regarding the tariff lawsuits, we know that at the U.S. Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court is expected to. On November 5th, the Supreme Court will make a final ruling on whether Trump's tariff case is legal or not. There will also be hearings and debates. Before November 5th, we can imagine that President Trump, as well as trade advisors like Bessent, Larson, and other economic advisors, will continuously release information to the public. Today, of course, there have been some heartfelt appeals and related opinions expressed. The real question is whether Trump's statements about the tariff war will bring a glimmer of hope after November 5th. Whether things are moving positively or negatively, we provided a detailed follow-up and analysis on tonight's Good Night program. In industry news, the biggest headline is that last night at 7 p.m., it was announced NVIDIA spent $5 billion to acquire a stake in Intel. This investment is likely to be positive for Intel's stock price and future performance. However, where there are positives, there are also negatives. So, just how much? Some are happy, some are worried. Just before class, a student also asked why. Today, why did Taiwan stocks, including companies like MediaTek, decline? And yesterday, while the stock market was rising due to Intel, why is it that during this period, companies like AMD, ASML, and even ARM have seen some stocks rise and others fall? In this process of NVIDIA's acquisition, which companies are the winners, and which ones should we pay special attention to? In addition, we'll also be tracking the latest earnings report from FedEx. FedEx itself is a freight company, and the demand for freight often reflects the overall economic climate. That's why FedEx and UPS are often seen as economic indicators. In this latest earnings report, their performance was quite remarkable, but what exactly did they mention? With regard to future tariff impacts, is it really the case that FedEx or UPS can just move past it? Or did this earnings report reveal something else worth pondering? These are today's investment highlights that I want to share with everyone. Good evening, everyone. Hello to Huijuanjuan, Anaya, and the staff at Zai Du. Good evening, Ming. Good evening to Kakoli, Hiwu Buji, and Hong Gong Ting. Good evening, Alice, Vice Commissioner. Okay, let's take a look at the economic data. Tonight, there are no major important U.S. economic data releases. And since there aren't any, this morning I'll briefly comment on the Bank of Japan's interest rate decision. Daiichi announced it at 11 a.m. this morning. Before the announcement, there was a core CPI annual rate figure. The previous value was 3.1, but this time it dropped to 2.7%. Of course, looking at Japan's economy, as long as Japan's CPI, whether it's the regular CPI or the core CPI, the consumer price index, if inflation continues to rise, then Japan will have more reason to raise interest rates. But as we can see in the latest data, the core CPI annual rate dropped to 2.7%. So, as expected, today the Bank of Japan kept the interest rate unchanged at 0.5%. This has a more direct impact on the Asian markets, but for US stocks, it's just something to note in passing. So, that's basically the data update and tracking I wanted to share with everyone today. Also, good evening to Marniza-chun and Jeffrey. Now, let's go back and take a look at what we just mentioned. Aside from this week, actually, the most important events of this month have pretty much already happened. The most important things this month included the release of the non-farm payroll numbers on September 5th, the PPI on the 10th, the CPI on the 11th, and, most importantly, the Fed interest rate decision that the whole world was watching, which was announced at 2 a.m. yesterday. So, in the first half of this month, almost all the major events, both domestic and international, key economic data from the US has already been released. So next, in the second half of the month, where should everyone focus? The focus for the latter half of the month will be on the PCE data, which comes out near month end. The PCE data monthly, annual, or core value is especially important. It's a key indicator the Federal Reserve uses to assess if inflation is heating up or cooling down. So, starting next week, we'll gradually face the release of this PCE data. Next week, since we won't be doing a live broadcast, I might be at a branch office for work, so it's not certain. In our group program next week, we'll track and update everyone on the latest PCE and core PCE data, how they're changing. You need to pay special attention to this. Aside from this news, let's talk about the US Department of Labor. If you remember, back in August this year, actually around July or August, the latest non-farm payroll data was released, right? The non-farm payroll numbers were much lower than expected, and they even made significant downward revisions to the totals for May and June. I remember that for either May or June, the number dropped directly from 147,000 to just 14,000. This huge decrease made Trump very unhappy, and because of that, he fired the head of the US Department of Labor's Bureau of Statistics. After the director was replaced, the latest financial report, the latest data, was released on September 5th. The non-farm payroll numbers for September 5th were announced then. Although it was lower than expected, Trump did not make a big fuss. He just said whether these data are true or false. In fact, let's use this analogy. For example, when a listed company releases its financial report, the financial report will definitely be beautified to some extent. It will not be said to be concealed. In other words, they will do some tricks or beautify the data to make the market see that the data is at least not too bad. So I believe that the Filong data on September 5th at the beginning of this month was more or less modified. So even though it was lower than expected, we can see that Trump didn't come out and make a statement. Of course, there was a bit of a mess in yesterday's announcement. Last night, the initial claims and continuing claims figures were released. Originally, we saw that the initial claims figures were around 230,000. The regional expectations and regional migration seemed good. The entire market opportunity doesn't seem to be as pessimistic as everyone imagined. Originally, we were more optimistic about it, including the continuing claims figures from the week before last. The number of unemployment benefits dropped from about 1,950,000 to 1,960,000, and the drop to 1,920,000 exceeded market expectations. Unexpectedly, not long after this good news came out, the U.S. Department of Labor announced today that the number of continuing unemployment claims in North Carolina was underestimated by nearly 20,000. Not 2,000, not 200, but 20,000. That's not a small number. The difference between 20,000 and 200 is 108,000. So it becomes the total number of continuing unemployment claims. The reason for the 1,920,000 figures is that yesterday's data on initial and renewal applications dropped significantly due to a statistical error. He didn't say where the error was or to what extent. Although he said he made a mistake, I think it might be a mistake. It's a bit unbelievable that there were so many errors, such as 200,000. I believe there are more or less positive and negative values for 200 or 2,000, but the error was 20,000. In other words, if North Carolina made an error of 20,000, we can't completely write it off. Other states may also have inaccurate data, so when everyone looks at these numbers in the future, keep this in mind. You need to understand that whether it's about unemployment benefits or the job market in the future, no matter if it's the data on CPI, PPI, or the PCE numbers at the end of the month, you have to keep in mind that these figures have all been polished to some extent. In the process of making them look better, there will definitely be some real data mixed in with incorrect information. So in other words, when you look at these numbers, it's best to take them with a grain of salt. Maybe discount them by 20% or even 30%. Just look at them as if they're 80% accurate. After all, Trump once made a big fuss and directly fired the head of the Statistics Bureau just because the non-farm payroll numbers were lower than expected. So, for the directors who took over after that, or for the authenticity of these numbers, I think there will always be some doubts. It's just that Trump wants the stock market to do well. He wants the economy to be active. He doesn't want everyone to face rising prices. So he'll demand that many companies, whether it's the number of layoffs, business costs, or even the process of passing on price increases to products, he'll make demands because he doesn't want widespread unrest or negative pull effects. As a result, the market will decline, pressuring companies to act, including local official data on stocks. From the North Carolina incident, where unemployment brokers underestimated by 20,000, we can probably imagine that in the next 3 years you can discount these data. So, I think the overall direction is still positive for the US stock market. At least it is still positive, because after these data are adjusted, it will definitely be better than expected or more beautiful. Since it is better than expected or it's more beautiful, the market will tend to view it more favorably. Although he has manipulated it, it's still more favorably viewed. That's the general concept. Good evening. Who is that Japanese word? I still don't know what it means. Anyway, some people say it's 4 tongues and 5 roads. Some say it's 9 tongues and 1 road. Some people say that because generally speaking, data is 4 tongues and 5 roads, right? Maybe Trump's data may not only be 4 tongues and 5 roads, but may have been directly transferred to the integer digits without knowing which decimal place. Anyway, when everyone looks at the data, just observe it. Another important issue is the tariff war. Previously, the Federal Court of Appeal and other courts all wanted to rule that Trump's tariffs were illegal. Regardless of the IEP or the National Emergency Economic Bill, he used to require countries to impose reciprocal tariffs or taxes, regardless of how much tax was imposed, which countries imposed the taxes, and many companies filed appeals. There are even many appeals bills and federal appeals bills. It is judged that Trump's tariff case is illegal and exceeds his presidential authority. Of course, Trump continues to appeal. The latest news is that the U.S. Supreme Court is expected to hold a hearing on this matter on November 5th. Before November 5th, we saw that Trump and Besant began to make some moral threats or more tender appeals. Anyway, let's talk about something more positive. For example, what Trump said was that this time, it wasn't just a gradual imposition of reciprocal tariffs starting on April 5th and ending on August 7th. During the imposition process, a lot of taxes from many countries went to the U.S. Treasury Department. So, the U.S. has earned a lot of tariff revenue in the past few months. So Trump said he would consider where to use the tariff revenue in the future. To help people in certain income groups, such as the more vulnerable, middle, and low-income people, we can use the revenue from tariffs to supplement the livelihoods of these vulnerable families and improve their lives. So what he did was use the tariff money paid by others, the tariff money paid by other countries, to save the people of his own country and then marry the people of his own country. What did the public opinion of his own country do? It improved the public's favorability. That's probably it. This is the general idea, so in a way, he's also telling the Supreme Court that even though the US has collected so much money and so much tax revenue, which may cause some disputes or increase costs for certain companies or countries. Since we've collected so much money, I might allocate a portion of it to help improve the livelihoods of our domestic citizens to help the poor. Okay, so you need to understand that what I'm doing is taking from the rich to help the poor. It's the concept of wealth redistribution, kind of like Robin Hood. On the other hand, Besson, the Secretary of the Treasury, said he was more like sending a message to the Supreme Court, kind of warning them. He said something along the lines of, if the Supreme Court eventually rules that these tariffs are illegal, then the Treasury Department will have to refund at least half of the tariffs collected. Just think about it. The Treasury originally estimated that this year's total tariff revenue, at least, I forget the exact number. I don't remember if it was $100 billion or $300 billion. So much money, all in US dollars. If you have to refund half of that, that's money that's already in the pocket, already swallowed up by Trump and the government. Now, Besson is saying, if our country is forced to refund half of that money because the tariffs are ruled illegal, it's already been swallowed, maybe even digested, and used for other things. It's already been used for things like public welfare, infrastructure, national defense budgets, or healthcare budgets. I've already digested it, and now I have to cough up half of it? That's a huge impact. Plus, he said if this tariff ruling really drags on until next June, the numbers affected won't just be 100 billion or 200 billion. The amount impacted could be as much as 750 billion US dollars. He said that if this data is really withdrawn, it will have a huge impact and may cause economic chaos in the entire United States. Is this the case? Of course, there will be such a situation. It feels like he is talking to the Supreme Court and saying, for example, I am now building a house halfway and the foundation has been laid. I have not only given him the foundation, but I have also built it to the third floor. It is already halfway built. And now you ask me to tear it all down and rebuild it, and even spit out the steel, cement, soil, and everything else to these people and contractors. How do you think it is possible? So it is basically impossible to tear down and rebuild a house halfway through. So we can see that Trump and Besant have some warmth. There are also threats in the calls. It's nothing more than hoping that the Supreme Court will listen to some grassroots information during the debate on November 5th. What the final ruling will be is unknown now because there is still about a month and a half left. There are still many variables. But according to the current logic and the common sense, I think the Supreme Court's final ruling may not be completely unfavorable. Trump may still tell everyone that maybe some part of the ruling will be considered illegal, which means he cannot enforce it, but some part he can do it if he wants to. So how much weight will it have? We will see slowly at that time. But you said to strike it all down, and the Supreme Court said, if ruling demands everything back, returning over half tariff revenue, chances are slim. Massive global and domestic turmoil, making stabilization impossible. Impact too great. Overturning everything, chances low, house already built. Some parts taxable, some not. Presidential powers, adjustments will occur. There will be some restrictions, but it's obviously impossible to just let everything go. And I don't think everything will be tightened up either. This is just some additional information for everyone. Also, regarding the trade war, to add a bit more, tonight at 9 p.m., China's Ministry of Commerce expects that Trump and Xi Jinping will have a phone call. The content of the call will no doubt be about things like the trade war, discussing how to cooperate. And then, things like TikTok, this is also pretty interesting. Last week, we talked about how China and the US have been holding negotiations about the trade war, like in Madrid, Spain, and New Delhi, right? And during that time, they also talked about TikTok. They said that there's already some basic framework and consensus on how to cooperate, how TikTok's data will be handled, how people will use it, and issues around user safety, and so on. How should these things be managed, and will the data end up being sent to China? They have some preliminary framework and consensus, but whether the talks go well or not, last time the talks went pretty well, but no one really knows why. Tonight, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, good evening Mimi Link and STE, and good evening to Ashi Ten as well. But for some reason, today the Chinese Fire Department suddenly made a statement again. They said they were responding to the TikTok issue. He repeated the same old line, saying that in response to the TikTok issue, They would absolutely not sacrifice the interests of businesses just to reach some so-called trade war negotiations. Basically, he was talking about things that are pretty unlikely to happen. As for what exactly will be discussed in tonight's call between Trump and Xi, we'll just have to wait and see as things unfold. But overall, I think the development of the US-China trade war will at least be somewhat positive, or at least leaning in a positive direction. Because if it weren't positive, Trump and Xi wouldn't even be having a phone call. If they weren't going to talk at all, what would that mean? So, if you remember, in April and May of this year, Trump imposed reciprocal tariffs, essentially testing the world. He specified tariffs each country would face. Taiwan got 34%, China 32 or 35%, whatever the exact numbers. Some countries like Cambodia and Vietnam even got 50%. After these tariffs were set, do you recall that April to May period when Trump leveraged this to force Xi Jinping to give in? He kept telling the market and media, "I'm about to talk with Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is about to come talk to me." But it was all smoke and mirrors. Xi Jinping didn't care, he completely ignored him. They didn't even converse. So what I'm saying is, if the trade war heads in a bad direction, if things go south, Xi Jinping won't even bother to have a conversation with Trump. But if things go in a positive direction, you can see it. For example, there was the first US-China meeting, then a second round of trade talks, and so on. Then they gradually started discussing things like TikTok, trade, and how to handle the chip situation. Whether it's easing export controls or other restrictions, rare earths are also part of the reason. It even includes things like the Trump-Xi phone call tonight, which will be much better than the deadlock in April. So, everyone should pay attention and see how Trump and Xi handle things tonight at 9. Okay, let me talk about something else. Wasn't this company already having revenue issues before and was about to file for bankruptcy, or maybe already did? The stock price dropped a lot. It fell by over 90%. Anyway, it dropped a lot. I don't have the candlestick chart to analyze it today. If there's a chance, I'll go over it next time. As for this Wolf stock, I don't know if it's a semiconductor company. Anyway, he also asked, why doesn't Trump use this money to pay off national debt or invest in infrastructure? Wouldn't that be better than giving it to certain people? Well, he did do those things. He took action on that. Is Deco doing delivery and product placement simultaneously? Teacher, do you like to travel? Do you often need to go abroad and try international cuisine? Yes, I do like traveling. I haven't gone abroad for 2 or 3 years. Since COVID-19 3 years ago, I haven't traveled overseas. For the past 3 years, I've been traveling Taiwan. I've visited all attractions in Taiwan. As for international cuisine, I like them all. As long as it's good food, I like it. As long as it's delicious, I like it. As long as it's not too spicy, I'll eat it. I enjoy traveling in Taiwan. Didn't I talk to everyone about this before? I've ridden a scooter around Taiwan 3 or 4 times. As for traveling by car or train, I can't even count how many times I've done that. If I get the chance, I'll share more of those experiences. Now, let's look at the actual. As for the current supply and lending yield, it remains at 4.11, and the overall interest rate has reached 3.64% without much fluctuation. The number of rate cuts is still around 1.7 times. In other words, by the end of this year, maybe in October, at the end of October, there might be a chance for a rate cut, or there could be another opportunity in mid-December. Overall, we still expect that the total number of rate cuts this year will be around 2. It should be about 2 times, one in September, and then possibly another at the end of December in December. Maybe that's how it will play out. As for whether there will be a rate cut or adjustment at the end of October, I think we still need to look at the overall economic data, including Trump's remarks, the statements from the Fed, and the positions of relevant officials from the Federal Reserve. All of these are big variables, and there are a lot of uncertainties. With uncertainties, you might ask if 3 rate cuts are possible. It's possible, but unlikely. 2 rate cuts are something we can look forward to. Regarding the US dollar, since Trump plans rate cuts, then the US dollar index remains weaker short-term. Watch positions around the moving average. Climbing above it provides support. Today, it rose 0.2%. International affairs and geopolitical risks. I just have to call out Trump here. What did Trump say? Trump said he was disappointed in Putin. Some people say that this outcome means China isn't siding with Trump. That's right. It's because liquefied natural gas was blocked by China. Is the audio okay? Okay, good. If not, okay, good. Then, let's look at the energy risk. Trump was disappointed in Putin. He said there's a need to lower oil prices further. Why? He thinks European countries rely too heavily on Russia for energy, whether crude oil or natural gas. And it's true, whether cheap Russian crude oil or cheap Russian natural gas. European countries just keep using more and more, and they can't stop because they really need it. Especially when winter comes, Russian natural gas becomes even more useful and even cheaper. Everyone already knows that there are two pipelines running straight from Russia to Germany, both for natural gas. I remember the pipelines are called Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. Like the bay in Taipei's Baizuashui River, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 are specifically natural gas pipelines. They go chugging along, passing through the Baltic Sea and the 3 Baltic countries, then run under the sea, transporting gas directly from Russia to Germany. So these 2 natural gas pipelines are, of course, in huge demand across all of Europe, especially Germany, which relies heavily on them. Getting Russian natural gas. So you're asking, in the future, whether it's natural gas or crude oil, can all the European countries really stop using Russian energy altogether? And then, to impose sweeping sanctions on Russia, we've mentioned before that the chances of this happening are almost zero. Even if it were possible, it wouldn't be carried out so quickly. If there were a way to do it that fast, it still wouldn't be implemented that quickly. The EU or the Eurozone or Europe as a whole, if they were really able to sanction Russia over the Russia-Ukraine war, they wouldn't have had to impose sanctions for the 19th time and still haven't seen any results. Okay, let me say it again. If it were truly effective, if Europe really had the ability to completely give up all of Russia's crude oil or energy, then they wouldn't have had to sanction Russia 19 times and still be imposing sanctions now. As for Trump, he said he was disappointed in Putin. But this isn't the first time Trump has expressed disappointment in Putin. So take it. There was a first, a second, and there will be an nth disappointment. Why? Because on the table, there are many political and interest considerations as well as power struggles and other factors. So, will the Russia-Ukraine war end quickly? Stuck in a stalemate. In the end, Trump said something I also found interesting. He said that if oil prices drop, the Russia-Ukraine conflict will end quickly. Because if oil prices drop, Russia wouldn't be able to make as much money from energy, right? If Russia can't earn as much from oil, then of course it can't support the front lines, can't buy weapons, can't buy missiles because there's just not enough money. Russia relies on natural gas and oil to make money, so if oil prices drop, Russia will obviously earn less, which means less support for military aid and such. Support would be lower, and that's reasonable. But in the end, Trump said something. He said that even though he knows lower oil prices are helpful for ending the Russia-Ukraine conflict, now is still not the time to ask Putin for a ceasefire. So, everything you just said before is pointless, it's all for nothing, because he said now isn't the time to ask Putin to stop fighting. So when exactly is the right time? Isn't it strange? Earlier you said you were disappointed that there needs to be progress in reducing crude oil, and then you hope European countries will join together to boycott Russia, but in the end you say now is not the time to ask Putin for a ceasefire. Isn't that weird? So I really don't understand why. What he said before and after is just so contradictory, so I believe in the future his disappointment with Putin won't be this one time. Of course, sanctioning Russian crude oil isn't something can be accomplished overnight. So since they can't impose sanctions, since there's no way to stop using Russian crude oil, no sanctions, no war, nothing weird going on, crude oil prices have stayed sluggish. Why? No extra geopolitical risks, they're just lukewarm. Plus, Trump wants oil prices to drop. With Trump hoping for lower prices and geopolitical risks cooling off, at most, a stalemate, no progress, no escalation. In this situation, crude oil prices, along with the domestic global demand for crude oil below the supply. Crude oil dropped 0.9%. Trend weak. I'll update on FedEx. Some people just talk about it, but in reality, it doesn't really have any special effect. Like Anna said, that's right, the EU and the US are both like this. Someone asked, "Teacher, how do you view the mindset and strategies when you're facing a losing streak in a card game? For example, what should you do when your luck is bad?" Okay, let me tell you all. Though I rarely play cards, mahjong, bridge, or any game, a student's question is interesting. When playing cards, if things go downhill, if luck worsens, how do you adjust your mindset? It's like investing, stocks, Taiwan stocks, US stocks, futures, or options, it's all the same. When investments go badly, remember this. From my experience, when things aren't going your way, people tend to have this habit. When things go badly, you want to turn it around quickly. You want to make a comeback, recover losses. If you fall on this stock, you want to get back up with it, right? You think, if it keeps dropping, I'll just average down, buying more as it falls. Then, one day, if it rebounds sharply, because you average down, when it bounces back, all positions you were stuck in will make money. And because you bought more at lower prices, when it rebounds, your lower priced positions will also profit. This is the perfect matrix. Ideal sounds great, but reality is much harsher. Everyone's experienced this. The more you average down, the more you try to recover, the worse things get. The more you force a comeback, the more you want to make money, the more you average down, the more you realize you get poorer. You keep losing, and eventually, you wonder, why isn't it bouncing back? US and Taiwan markets are hitting new highs, so why are my stocks hitting new lows? You'll have these doubts. Remember, whether playing cards or investing, it's the same. When luck is bad, when things aren't going well, step back and observe. Take a break and really look at the situation, whether at the card table or in the stock market. Look at economic trends, individual stock trends, and see if your investments are really going as expected. If it is obvious that the stocks that are rising now are all AI concept stocks, such as server heat dissipation PCB, etc. Lokasoko, a lot of AI-related concept stocks are rising, but you buy a plastic stock, textile stock, cement stock, for example, Taiwan Cement Yuanfang or Formosa Plastics Group, no matter what, these stocks have nothing to do with the overall market, then how can you possibly think if you keep embezzling Formosa Cement and Formosa Plastics today, will these stocks really make you money if the market goes up again? No, because one is going down and the other is going up. So you have to buy the right stocks and the right industries to have a chance of rising higher than the market and making more money than the market, right? So when things are not going well for everyone, no matter what you do, when it comes to stocks, you have to remember to get out first and don't try to attract investors. A safe place is a place where you can keep your money. Remember, a small loss is also a profit. So, when things don't go well for me in investing or stocks, what do? I exit the market first. I simply don't look at the Taiwan stock market. I don't look at it for 3 or 5 days. After you calm down and make the next move, I think you will be more confident. Then, you can rebuild from a small position and make money slowly. As your confidence accumulates, your confidence will increase. When you invest, you will be relatively smoother, just like playing cards. When your speech is smoother, everything you do will go more smoothly. Remember one thing, we all often have a myth, which is, where am I? There's an old saying we hear, where you fall is where you get back up, right? Investors get lost in this idea. If I lost money on TSMC today, I'd think I'd earn it back with TSMC. I keep thinking, this stock made me lose money, so I'd make it back with the stock. I want to start over from here. You want to earn it back from that same stock, but you don't have to. On your investment journey, remember, because you fell with one stock doesn't mean you have to get back up with that same stock. There's no need for that. In Taiwan or the US, there are thousands of stocks, 1 or 2,000 at least, to choose from. If this stock isn't working out, maybe it's not a match, maybe you and this stock don't have chemistry. If you switch to another stock, you can quickly earn back what you lost. Don't get fixated on just one stock. If you get too attached, you won't last long in this game. Like Hacker said, if some stocks don't suit you, or you can't do well, and even after switching stocks you still can't make money, then maybe you should stop playing. Then just don't play at all. Let me give you an example from my own family. Every time I give a talk at different branch offices, I often mention that even my parents buy stocks, right? But honestly, stocks really aren't suitable for everyone. Some people make money in real estate, some people make money running a business as a boss, and some people make a lot of money in politics. As for why politicians make so much money, don't ask me. I have no idea why they make that much, but anyway, there are all kinds of ways to make money. You don't have to rely on stocks to get rich. So when you realize that, for example, like some of my family members, there are relatives in my family who are fine as long as they don't play the stock market. But the moment they buy in, it's the market peak. And as soon as they sell, the stock price starts to soar. You can't really explain why, but it just feels weird, almost like there's something supernatural going on. Every time they enter the market, as soon as they buy, the stock starts to drop. Not by much, but within 3 days, or at most a week, it goes down. As long as they don't buy stocks, they're fine. But the moment they sell, the price keeps going up. It's happened repeatedly, without fail. If you find yourself in this situation, you shouldn't buy stocks. Don't get involved in the stock market, because it's not a good fit for you. If something doesn't suit you and you force it, it's like a couple wrong for each other. The more you stay together, refusing to break up, what happens? There will be domestic violence, divorce, arguments. It gets messy. So I wanted to share this. When you're at a disadvantage, whether at the card table, because there's a saying, when you don't know who at the card table is losing. When you're having the worst luck at the card table, it could be you who's the unluckiest. Remember, it's best to step away for a while. Take a break from the card table, have coffee, relax, anything is good. Then, when you return, you'll be in a better state to play. Some people talk about reverse indicator luck. Honestly, being a reverse indicator isn't easy, because it's not easy to be off the mark. Someone in my family says he probably bought stocks at the high point. Let me tell you something. Recently, none of my family members bought stocks. So why did the Taiwan Stock Exchange rise from 17,000 points to 25,000 points? Why didn't he buy? He didn't enter the market. A few days ago, he argued with me and asked, "Teacher Jiang, when can I buy? Why did it rise 10,000 points? Why can't I enter the market? It's painful." I told him, don't enter the market, because once you enter the market, it will be at the high point. Don't enter the market. If you don't enter the market, the majority of investors will make money and the stock market will continue to hit new highs. Don't enter the market. Let's look back. Okay, let's look back at the Intel and Pfizer story. Intel acquired Pfizer. After acquiring shares, it took over joys and hatreds. Don't stand on the wrong side. If you stand on the wrong side, there may be short-term worries and short-term happiness. Whether it will become long-term happiness and worry depends on Intel's luck. If Intel's performance gets better and better through cooperation with Pfizer, and its physical condition improves, with the support of the US government and $2 billion investment from Japan's SoftBank, Pfizer will work with it on AI CPUs. If the GPU cooperation is successful and the stock conversion is successful, it may be beneficial to Intel's long-term prospects. It will be beneficial to Intel camps. Of course, in the long run, the premise is they must grow up and successfully convert shares for a chance. If they can't, it's the same old story, a disaster. If conversion fails, these camps or their rivals might not be negatively affected. So, in the short term, there will be both bullish and bearish groups, but this is more of a very short-term situation. This is a very short-term thing. Let's look at what happened last night. Previously, the US government acquired a 10% stake in Intel. After SoftBank added another 21%, yesterday Nvidia also bought $5 billion worth of shares at around $23 per share, nearly 5% of the company. Intel will help Nvidia with x86 CPU collaboration, and Nvidia will integrate this CPU into its AI architecture. Will this collaboration quickly impact TSMC? No, because high-end chips and GPUs, not just 2 or 3 nanometer, but many, from Nvidia, Samsung, Lilly, Coco, and others, rely on TSMC's advanced manufacturing processes. TSMC is too strong. They're moving from 2 to 3 nanometers and aiming for 1.7 nanometers. Their advanced manufacturing process is exceptionally strong, with over 60 or 70% market share. Nvidia. When making these AI GPUs, like the high-end GP300, 400, 200, 300 chips, upcoming Rubin chips, they rely on TSMC's foundry, manufacturing process, or capabilities. They won't turn to Intel. In the short term, Nvidia might give some orders to Intel, mostly for lower-end products like entry-level graphics cards. Nvidia has invested $5 billion with Intel, which will help accelerate the localization of the semiconductor supply chain in the United States. In the long run, TSMC's high-end manufacturing capabilities remain extremely strong. So, if you're asking whether this will impact TSMC's position, it's pretty much impossible at this point. Also, Intel. Intel has had a long-term customer relationship with ASML, so when it comes to things like photolithography technology, EUV, extreme ultraviolet equipment, and so on, Intel has always worked closely with ASML. So, if in the future Intel successfully transforms itself and its chip foundry processes continue to improve and grow, then ASML's biggest partner will also benefit, so that's why yesterday companies like Nvidia, Intel, and ASML all saw big gains. It's because those with collaborative relationships tend to rise together. Advanced manufacturing and high-end chips still need TSMC. There's no second option, only TSMC. Intel can't manufacture their chips. They can't make them. If not, how can they proceed? Even if they could, yields would be low. For B100, B200, GB200, or upcoming Ruby/R series, Intel can't handle them. So, with Intel's current technology, their patented technology and manufacturing processes can't compare to TSMC. In this situation, only lower-end products, like graphics chips or cards, might be handed over to Intel. When it comes to alliances or collaborations, pay more attention to this aspect. My answer regarding ASML and TSMC. It doesn't have much impact, pay attention to it. On the other hand, be careful with under more pressure. When pressure is higher, the short-term impact will be greater. For example, the ARM camp. Why is the ARM camp under more pressure? This includes, Xiaomanu asked Lian. MediaTek would drop today. ARM has partner companies in its alliance, also connected to MediaTek. Here's how ARM puts it. Let's divide the market for electronic products into 2 major segments. If we split it into 2 big parts, when it comes to personal computers or servers, the mainstream choice is always whose architecture? It's always Intel's architecture. Chips like Yongjing all use. But phones, Apple's Jinta system, or basically, for phones, almost 98% or more of all phones use ARM's system, ARM's architecture. I think that architecture, it's called RISC, right? Or is it RSIC or something? I'm not sure if I'm spelling it wrong, but it's RISC. This camp is specifically for, like, phones or IoT. We're talking about the Internet of Things and all that. These things require low power, low energy consumption, and the design is simple, so everyone uses ARM's system to design these phone chips and phone architectures. But for PCs and servers, which need high-power computing and are more complex, they use Intel's camp. Now, here's the key point. In the past, the ARM camp was mainly for phones and IoT-related fields, but gradually, they've also been moving into the AI industry, getting involved in AI development. The hottest thing right now is AI. Before this whole AI boom, NVIDIA had already started collaborating with ARM. Now, here's where the issue lies. When AI becomes the biggest and fastest growing sector in the market, whoever gets AI wins. Whoever controls AI is king. So, whether your revenue is good or not, whether you have a huge breakout in the future, it all depends on this area. That's why ARM wants to break in and grab AI orders and the AI market. Intel didn't really focus on AI before, but now they've started investing in NVIDIA and forming strategic alliances. So, NVIDIA. NVIDIA is also a very important leader in AI. In other words, NVIDIA's camp is huge in AI, and now they're collaborating with Intel. So in the future, besides PCs and servers, Intel will also have a share and growth in the AI platform sector. They'll get a piece of this big pie too. And as we just said, whoever gets a piece of the AI pie will rule the world. So this area. If Intel manages to rise in AI through this NVIDIA collaboration, who feels the biggest threat? ARM. ARM isn't the biggest AI player. They're biggest in mobile, but still developing in AI. So, pressure is greater on the AI camp, and AI is first impacted. MediaTek is also the largest mobile manufacturer, so why is MediaTek under more pressure in the Taiwan stock market today? It's also because of this news. Another company under pressure is Supermicro and AMD. Why is AMD under so much pressure? Because AMD makes two products, CPUs, I forgot which series, it's been a while since. They make CPUs and GPUs. For GPUs, it's the MI series, MI 300, 305, 308, 3453, and so on. As for CPUs, in the past, the biggest player in the PC market was the CPU. The CPU, or Central Processing Unit, is the computer's heart. The GPU, or Graphics Processing Unit, handles graphics. So, they're different, CPU for computing, GPU for graphics. CPU and GPU are the two main computer components, one for graphics, the other the computer's heart. In the past, in personal computers, the two biggest CPU manufacturers were Intel and, you know, the old days, 386, 486, 586, then Celeron, then the Pentium series, Pentium 1, 2, 3, all the way up to Pentium. They were really strong, and back then, AMD was always behind Intel in the CPU market. But in recent years, AMD has actually surpassed Intel and is selling especially well, better than Intel, in fact. So in the CPU field, there are basically two major companies, one is Intel, and the other is AMD. In the GPU market, AMD also develops GPUs, but the company with over 80% market share is, who? NVIDIA, led by Jensen Huang. So NVIDIA holds about 80%, and AMD holds around 10%. It's almost like these two companies have completely monopolized the market. So, if Pfizer and Intel were to collaborate today, what would it mean? One is the largest GPU manufacturer, and the other is a CPU competitor. So if these two join forces, it would put a lot of pressure on AMD because both are its rivals. One is a CPU competitor, and the other is a GPU competitor. If these two actually collaborate and form a strategic alliance, then AMD is doomed. AMD would be under a lot of pressure because it would become the parent recipient. Whether it's CPU or GPU, both are collaborating. So I think the challenges for AMD in the future will be even greater. In addition, for special application chips like ASICs, Broadcom's market share in server network communications and other markets may also be squeezed out. Just like we just told you, Intel's largest and most important applications are in personal computers, and server chips and other applications will be relatively large. So it may also slightly affect Broadcom's AISI in server network communications. See chip-related markets, so we'll see if some are happy or some are ugly. This will have an impact. Finally, of course, there's Intel. Intel hasn't really hit the big time yet. Its foundry business had revenue of $4.4 billion in the latest quarter, which is not bad, right? But after deducting costs and operating expenses, its operating loss was a whopping $3.2 billion. That's a loss of nearly 10 billion new Taiwan dollars, or 100 billion new Taiwan dollars. It's very, very high, so we can only say. In the short term, before Intel's share conversion is successful, it will have an impact on the stocks I just mentioned, such as ARM, AMD, and Broadcom. The stock prices may see some negative reactions in the next 1 or 2 days, but in the long term, whether the impact will be that significant depends on Intel's luck. Regarding the stock price, Intel's weekly K-line chart shows these two trend lines. They've been fluctuating for a while, from June last year to now, for almost a year now, and have remained around 20 to 26 yuan. It kept fluctuating here, fluctuating, and then this week, faced with this positive news, it suddenly jumped up. Whether it can regain its footing in the future remains to be seen. The upper resistance is at the 200-week moving average. You can look at the screen. The 200-week moving average becomes the short-term resistance. Support, the previous resistance now becomes support. Treat it as short-term support. If it really manages to successfully convert to stock, there might be a chance to break through the 200-week moving average. That's the update on Intel and some industry news for everyone. ASML, a positive factor, rose 6.37% yesterday, as mentioned. Because it's considered a long-term partner with Intel. As a partner, Porsche surged over 6 points yesterday, reaching $927. Remember, if this blue curve neckline isn't broken, no doubts. AMD faces challenges with two major competitors in CPU and GPU markets. Post-collaboration, AMD's pressure is higher. Short-term, if it can't break this moving average, caution is needed, especially on the monthly line. If trending downward, watch ARM and AMD. ARM's system differs from x86, Intel's. ARM and AMD have different architectures, so watch the competition. Who will come out on top remains to be seen. For AMD, watch the 200-day moving average. If it stays above the 200-day and 20-day moving averages, serving as short-term support levels. Short-term, it should fluctuate and consolidate near the 20-day, 200-day, and 50-day moving averages. No major financial issues, but short-term, due to Nvidia's Intel investment news, pressure is expected. This follows Intel/Nvidia news. FedEx, Peter said they're giving up contract manufacturing. TSMC remains strongest in wafer foundry, so focusing on innovation is better. Newer areas like IC or chip design might have a better chance, especially if they move toward AI development. That's a better direction. Competing with TSMC in the foundry market, I don't think their technology can catch up. They're already several generations behind. If you really want to catch up quickly, competing with TSMC through foundry probably isn't the way. As for FedEx, let's discuss role as an economic indicator, especially looking at recent third-quarter financial report. As of the end of August, the report showed revenue and profit were good and met expectations. They mentioned although the average daily international export volume decreased 3% year-over-year, domestic packages U.S. business revenue and the average daily delivery volume in the U.S. grew by 5%. Full-year revenue expected to grow 4 to 6%, which is in line with expectations. Overall, impact of tariffs on The impact will likely be $150 million in Q3, so the full-year impact will be $1 billion. Overall, he's relatively optimistic. The current full-year revenue outlook is within expectations, exceeding market expectations. Originally, everyone thought the tariff war might significantly impact parcel, freight, and delivery operators like UPS and FedEx. However, the impact on financial reports is not significant. Before the U.S. stock market opened, the Federal Reserve meeting saw a 5% surge. Can it challenge the 200-day moving average? If it breaks through. But if it goes up, don't chase it. It will fall back to the 200-day or 50-day moving average for a low-level move. Long-term, from May to now, there's been trend line support. This support hasn't broken, touched 3 times in 6 months. Before the blue curve breaks, observe it as a medium to long-term support point. Yesterday, there was a small increase of 0.32, but before the U.S. stock market opened, federal mining rose strongly by 5.39%. Companies like Yabao and UPS rose by 1.55% before market open. Tesla rose by 1.21%, and Knox, Boeing, and Didion rose by 0.8% to 0.9% before market open. The falling company is Paramount Skydance, due to merger themes. Nasdaq Brothers and many other stocks fell 2% before market open. Micron also fell 1.62% before market open. Micron is strong, setting new highs, but today is a small correction. Advanced Micro Devices and AMD also fell slightly by 0.8% to 0.9% before market open. The Dow Jones Industrial Average maintains a strong pattern, staying above the 50-day and 20-day moving averages, gradually falling and rising. Overall, performance is not bad. Yesterday's slight increase of 0.27. The strongest is the Fibonacci Index. Spectrum Semiconductor rose 3.6% yesterday, mainly due to Intel's investment. This boosted Applied Materials, ASML, and Micron, all rising sharply and remaining above the monthly moving average. The entire semiconductor index and companies are relatively strong. I am more inclined to be positive. The other 7 giants maintain a strong pattern. They rose slightly by 0.19% yesterday and remained above the monthly line. In the fourth quarter's market, both the semiconductor index and the 7 giants are important. They will be a very important confidence and lead the market, the international stock market or the Taiwan stock market. They are important confidence indicators. So if you really don't know how to operate the 7 giants, a candidate is to be considered. If you have questions about this operation, leave us a message. If you can't reply to our program, I will reply to everyone in the next program. Like, subscribe, and share. Smooth trading, and we'll see you next week.
Our company has no improper financial interests in the individual securities recommended or analyzed. The information in this program is for reference only. Investors should make independent judgments, evaluate carefully, and bear their own investment risks. If you don't want to miss the latest market updates, be sure to turn on the notification bell and hit subscribe. In addition, we have plenty of great video content on both Facebook and YouTube. Don't miss out. In our group, we share in-depth explanations of global financial events with you every day.